There's obviously a lot of intrigue and a whole lot of question marks surrounding the BYU football program ahead of the 2025 season. And we're going to talk to a guy who has written tens of thousands of words about this football season. And what does he make of the Cougars' chances at making a run at the Big 12 title? We're getting into this with Jeff Hansen of Give 'em Hell Brigham on a special edition of Locked On Cougars.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 13-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident BYU expert and insider here on this fine podcast, and pleased to welcome in today a good friend of the show and just a good friend overall. He is Jeff Hansen of Give 'em Hell Brigham, also Cougar Sports Insider, KSL Sports Rewind on Friday nights on the KSL Sports Zone during the high school football season here locally. Jeff, we're going to get into your preview that you just recently published momentarily, but there's a key question I think coming into this season about the BYU football program I want to start you off with here, and that is, with the House settlement finally done, it's been approved by Judge Claudia Wilkin. There is some thought out there that BYU could go back to being at a disadvantage with the rules as being stipulated in this settlement. What is your opinion on that matter?
I think that BYU fans, just generally, all of us, throughout our history, we tend to look for the ways that the world is out to get us. That's just what happens. It's who we are. I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with Governor Boggs. I don't know what it is, but that's who we are, right? Somebody's always out to get us. And so I think it's natural that that's where we kind of tend to look at this and say, oh no, what's bad for BYU? For my seat, I don't think much changes, right? NIL still exists. I don't think that BYU, like, I know what all the national headlines say, that, you know, BYU's got multi-million-dollar offers going out to anybody and everybody. How could that possibly be true or legitimate? Look, I just don't buy it. Like, I think BYU is paying well in NIL. They're certainly in the top echelon of college sports, but I don't think they're paying so much far and above and beyond what everybody else does that it's unrealistic. So with that said, if the entire market is unrealistic, then how is Deloitte going to say that that's not realistic, right? That that's not what market value is. Yeah. And if the rest of the market comes back down to earth a little bit, cool. BYU's right there. They got plenty of money to play whatever level they're supposed to play in. So as long as bagmen don't come back, and I don't think that they will. I mean, if you go back to like Cam Newton was like the biggest story, right? That of his bagman. I think we were talking like $200,000 cash, if I remember right. So at the dollar volumes that we've grown accustomed to in the last few years, bagmen aren't going to carry around millions of dollars in cash. Like that's just not going to happen. So I don't know, man. I don't think that the oversight committee, the clearinghouse boogeyman, is as bad as it sounds and as bad as some fans have hoped that it wouldn't be, or maybe thought that it might be. I think BYU is going to be just fine.
Well, as long as Jeremy Pruitt's bagmen aren't carrying $200,000 around in McDonald's bags, as they were alleged to have done for Tennessee back in the day, yeah, I'm with you on that. Now, the other side of it is, you mentioned the NIL aspect. That's one thing I think people are forgetting in all this, that NIL is not going anywhere. The cap is its own thing. Revenue share is a whole new pot of money to be shared with these athletes, but NIL is going back to essentially what it's supposed to be. If you are a business, a person who has a product, a company you want to advertise, all you do is sign a sponsorship agreement with these athletes. You specify they're going to do this for this amount of money. You run it past Deloitte and this NIL Go clearinghouse. And considering that, I don't believe for a second that they're going to really, I think, renege on a ton of these NIL deals. I think BYU's in a good spot.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the purpose of this Deloitte is to keep everything uniform. The purpose of Deloitte and NIL Go is not to decline NIL deals. That's not why they've been designed. They're supposed to improve them, right? So I think more often than not, deals are going to get approved. I think once BYU understands the parameters, once everybody understands the parameters and they figure out what NIL Go is going to do and what it looks like, I think everybody's going to find their footing, and it's going to go back to what it's been of who has money and who doesn't. Because keep in mind, right, Jake, there are some teams that aren't going to be able to afford the revenue sharing, much less any other NIL stuff, don't have the booster support, things like that. you still need to have money and access to money, and BYU has that in spades. So I think BYU is going to be just fine.
Yeah, with that, the ACC administrators were told by Deloitte that 70% of booster collective-led NIL deals would have been nixed under this clearinghouse, whereas 90% of true NIL deals with a company or a brand out there would have been approved. So I'm with you. I think BYU's in a good spot because they've got a lot of highly motivated boosters who've got a lot of companies they'd like to promote, and money's going to still flow. Let's just put it that way. Now, the other thing, Jeff, is you have written an extensive, it's 131 pages, right, of a preview here, talking about every aspect of the BYU football program going into 2025. And that's what I wanted to get your thoughts on the House settlement. But I think the other side of it is this is a BYU program that came off an incredible year last year, 11-2, 13th in the national polls, absolutely demolished Colorado in that Alamo Bowl. Give me just kind of your overall thought about the program's, I guess, the state of the program right now entering 2025.
I think that BYU is in as good of a position as they have been maybe ever. I mean, even going back to the 80s when it was Lavelle and they were winning every single year, I think that BYU is about to enter their the best era of BYU athletics. They've got more money than they've ever had. They're not in the SEC or the Big Ten, but they are closer to the inside of the club than BYU has ever been. I think that the dynamics of the sport, BYU's got a really unique opportunity to still be something a little bit different in the college football world. I've talked about this a ton, but I think that BYU has an advantage over a lot of schools right now, because if you come to BYU, you're not just coming for a bag of money or a bag of cash. Like, you've got to make some sacrifices off the field that you don't have to make at other schools. You've got to have an academic requirement that's, maybe not as high as Stanford, but it's higher than a lot of other schools. So even in this era of transfer portal and free transfers and NIL and all that stuff, you still have to set some of that aside and do something a little bit different in order to go to BYU. And I think that's such a big advantage for Kalani and this coaching staff, because there's already some buy-in inherently when somebody walks into the locker room, where a lot of these other schools, you're seeing longtime coaches, including Nick Saban, who had to retire because he couldn't figure it out, right? Like, you're seeing longtime coaches who have been legends that don't know how to connect to players inside their locker room in today's era of college football. And I think that Kalani has that part figured out. I think we're about to see the best of BYU football. I'm excited for it. So state of the program, I think, is in a good shape. There's a lot of things that could still be addressed, things they need to improve on. I mean, that's not lost on anybody. But the general trajectory of this program is as bright as it has ever been.
Now, in terms of Kalani, he has made comments that if you're coming to BYU simply for a check, don't come here. And I know that could, somebody would say, why would he say such a thing? But I think it goes back to the point you just made there, Jeff. You have to sacrifice, and you're putting on for a brand that's different than almost any other football program. There are other religiously affiliated universities. Baylor is in the Big 12, obviously, but BYU is so synonymous with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that, there is more to it than, just coming and playing for a football program. And to your point, I think that Kalani, you mentioned, he's nailed the messaging on that, and he's just kind of laid it out for guys. If you're coming here just for the money, it ain't going to work out for you.
Yep, I completely agree. And I think culture right now, culture is what every head coach is struggling to find, and Kalani is the culture king. And so I think that is huge. I do think that it can be different for different sports, right? I mean, I think that BYU basketball, they got a different model entirely, and they have to, because that's the nature of that sport. And they got a different coach who can speak to a different model and is an expert in that model, right? Kalani can't run a pro-first program the same way that KY can. It's different. But I think BYU's got the right people in the right seats of the bus right now leading their athletic programs. I'm really excited for it.
All right. Coming up next, probably the top question overall that you wrote about in your preview, with or Jake Rzoff. What's going to go on with BYU football? And we're going to get into that next as we continue on with the special edition of Locked On Cougars and give them hell, Brigham. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs. The NBA finals are ongoing, my friends. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere that you have to experience live to get it. And this year's matchups are already delivering. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to do that. But even if it's not basketball you're into, whether it's baseball, theater events, comedy, concerts, Game Time has got the options for you guys. With killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. And the best part is you can go online right now, and with the Game Time guarantee, you know exactly what you're paying right up front with their fees added right into the total when you look at those seats. And more important, the Game Time guarantee, if you find a better price in the same row or section, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets and do it with our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. As always, please continue to subscribe, rate, and review. And I'm also going to add in a plug here for Jeff. Give him help, Brigham, Cougar Sports Insider. Everything that Jeff does, sign up for it, subscribe to it, and just be a part of it, because Jeff and the crew, I know you work with Garrett, I know you're with Robbie and those guys, you're absolutely killing it over there.
No, we appreciate it, Jake.
All right, so big question, obviously, surrounding Jake Rzoff. And as of recording this podcast and every podcast I've done since the lawsuit dropped, I have to add the caveat that nobody knows exactly what the timeline is on this. And you wrote about it in your preview about the impact of having Jake versus not having Jake. Give us a synopsis of where you think things stand for BYU and Jake Rzoff.
Yeah, I have no idea what's happening with the case. Nobody has any idea what's going to happen. I think that there's still a lot of uncertainty about his status, even within the program. So the way that I look at this, there's really kind of three versions of Jake Rzoff, or three versions of quarterback, I should say, that BYU kind of has to account for. First and foremost is, let's say that Jake does not play. Is that possible? Is it likely? I have no idea. I don't really care. Let's talk about what it means on the football field. If Jake doesn't play and they can learn that now, what does that cost BYU? So let's go back in time a year ago. Nobody had a lot of confidence that Jake Rzoff was going to be great. And the team ended up being very, very good. But if you look at Jake's box score, it was pretty pedestrian. It was way better than anybody thought it was going to be, but it was pretty pedestrian. I think a 20-12 touchdown to interception ratio, 2,400 passing yards, had some fumbles along the way, had some questionable decisions, was crazy clutch. He came up with big moments of that season against Utah, Oklahoma State, SMU. So the entirety of the season, I think it's easy to say that, hey, Jake Rzoff, he's the quarterback. BYU won 11 games. You can't not have that, but I don't know, right? I look at there were 3 games that Jake Rzoff, I'm giving him most of the credit. Yeah, the defense kept BYU in the games, all that other stuff. But those clutch moments, if Jake does not play, BYU is going to really miss those. Maybe somebody steps up and surprises us and has that gene, but I think BYU is going to miss that. That's something that's different, right? You either have it or you don't, and Jake clearly did. But beyond those clutch moments, I think that he was pretty replaceable for most of the season. 20-12, I think that's replaceable. 2,400 yards, I think that's replaceable. What did he have on the ground? 2, 3, maybe 400 rushing yards?
He had 600 rushing, even though it felt like it was lower than that. But still, that's 3,000 total offense, which it's replaceable, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not nothing, right? It's certainly not anything to scoff at. But I think BYU has 3 guys in the program that can replace that. So how many clutch moments are you going to have? Well, BYU had 3 last year. I don't know if that's normal. I haven't done the data to say how many last-minute drives in every year, but there were 3 last year in my head. Call that, 1.5, maybe 2 every year. That's maybe where BYU misses him. Maybe not having Jake costs BYU 1.5 games, and that sucks. That could take BYU from contender to non-contender. But that's still going to be a pretty darn good football team with or without Jake, right? And if somebody steps up and has those clutch moments, or an Isaiah Glasker goes clutch like Kyle Van Noy used to, and he comes up with clutch moments, then maybe BYU is able to, as a team, replicate that. So that's path 1, and I think that's the one that requires the most explanation. There's another path that, hey, they figure this out. Chargers are dropped or whatever happens. And Jake is playing distraction free. The team knows going into fall camp, everything's good. Cool. Then we're right back on the horse and all is well, right? I mean, everything you thought about BYU back in April remains true. Mm-hmm. And then there's a third option, and this is the scariest option to me, and I hope this is the one that BYU is able to avoid, and that's this uncertainty. That's this, okay, is he going to get suspended maybe? Is he suspended for a couple of games, and you're playing against Stanford, who you should beat by 4 or 5 touchdowns this year, but it's not really your starter. It's the last game of McKay Hillstead or whatever it is. That distraction. I mean, is the team able to prepare all summer long with this constant cloud of what might happen looming over their heads? That's the scenario that scares me, because I think that while BYU is very talented and a very good football team, they are not talented enough or good enough that they cannot be focused each and every week. They need to come in and know what they're going to do. They've got to prepare well. They've got to do all the things that they hit on last year. That's still what they have to do. That's the same recipe. And distractions at the quarterback position, distractions where coaches are having to answer the same questions week in and week out, that is the kryptonite in my mind of this entire BYU formula. I think BYU can survive without Jake. Maybe they're not quite the contenders we think they are, but they could be a darn good football team. Distraction-free Jake, great. Let's go to the Big 12 championship. Feel great about BYU being very good. That distraction, unknown Jake, uncertainty, that scares me, and that's the path that BYU has to avoid.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the mindset I've had. I kind of tagged it like 2 wins in terms of Jake. So I was thinking like, okay, if you look at what the odds makers out there, FanDuel and everybody else out there, you look at the Big 12 and they think the highest anybody's going to go is 8.5, maybe 9.5 wins, and the low is 5.5. That shows you this league, top to bottom, is fairly balanced. And yeah, if you go from maybe being a 10-2 team where those 2 wins get taken away and you're an 8-4 team, yeah. Well, in the way it plays out, yeah, you go from being a contender to knocking yourself out. Now, the other side of it is, Jeff, let's say they do have a quarterback change. They're just forced to for whatever reason. Who would you favor at this juncture at taking over that job?
Yeah, I have to acknowledge some bias here. I'm a high school football guy here in the state of Utah, so let's not discount that I've seen a lot more of McKay Hillstead than I've seen of anybody else in that room, right? You're in the same boat. I think McKay's a gamer. Look, he's small. He can't even lie. He's not even big enough that you can pretend that he's not small. I mean, he's small. It is what it is. But he was able to go to Logan and as a true freshman earn that starting job and play well. I mean, he was still a true freshman, had his ups and downs, but he played well. And I get it. Utah State is not the Big 12, but I don't have a question about his arm talent or his ability to play quarterback. I have questions about his size. And even in the Mountain West, dudes are still big. Dudes are still fast. And McKay, as a true freshman, proved, hey, he could figure that out and be effective. I think I lean towards McKay over Trayson Bourguet. But I look at Trayson Bourguet and I see a lot of Baylor Romney in Trayson Bourguet. He just sort of does everything pretty good. I don't think he's not elite in any area. I don't think he's even great in any area, but he's pretty good in everything. And I don't think he's bad at anything. He's more mobile than people realize. He's accurate. He throws a pretty good deep ball. He knows the offense. He's been here for a couple of years now. So I don't think you can go wrong with Trayson Bourguet, but I think that McKay Hillstead is an absolute gamer. And when the lights turn on, that's when you get the best of McKay. So if it were me and I'm making that call, I think I lean towards Hillstead, even though he gives a little bit in size, because I think the upside is a little bit higher. And of course, the wild card is Bear Bachmeier, and it's just a matter of how quickly can Bear learn an offense. Look, Keaton Slovis played a lot of college football, right? He was, by all accounts, a very, very intelligent quarterback who had seen everything there was to see at the college football ranks. It took him longer than a spring ball in a summer to really figure out this Aaron Roderick offense. I have my doubts that any true freshman can figure it out in one summer, especially after having played at a different offense and a different scheme in the spring. Yeah. But hey, look, if Bear Bachmeier can do it, then I think he's got the talent to be the best of the bunch. That's a really big ask.
Yeah, that's the thing is, like, people are talking about how his brother Tiger graduated in computer science from Stanford in 2.5 years. I'm like, okay, yeah, they're smart, but you're right. There's a nuanced thing. There's a field that you have to get into this offense and really understand to really truly master it. And you look at Zach Wilson, you look at Jaron Hall, you even look at a Keaton Slovis. It takes time to kind of get into this. And even Jake Rzoff, the 4 games at the end of that 2023 season, he felt like he was lost at points, and then he finally settled into it. So yeah, I get what you're saying there. And then on just one more question on the quarterback side of things. When it comes to quarterback recruiting, there's obviously a ton of people who wonder what the future holds, but if Jake is done, you're right. They have the 3 guys there. You add Enoch Watson to the mix as he comes home off of a mission. Like the cupboard's not bare. Let's just put it that way. Is that right?
No, not at all. And I'm glad you mentioned Enoch, because Enoch Watson's a dude. I mean, he can flat out play. I think a lot of people are looking at this quarterback room and saying, okay, Bear Bachmeier is being brought in to be the quarterback of the future. And maybe that's true. Maybe that's what he ends up being. But I can tell you right now, he's being brought in to compete with Enoch Watson to be the quarterback of the future. Enoch Watson can flat out play from ALA out there in Arizona. Very, very good quarterback, coached very, very well in high school by Ty Detmer and Max Hall. He understands the game, and he understands BYU, and he has a lot of the same strengths that Bear Bachmeier does. He's a very, very good athlete. I think he might be a better thrower than Bear is today. So yeah, I think that is the competition. Both of those guys are going to be very good. And of course, Ryder Lyons. I mean, that's where everybody's looking right now. You sign Ryder Lyons, and all of a sudden the entire future looks a lot different. And that's not likely. I don't know if that's likely or not, but it's not likely at this point. So I think the future of the quarterback spot at BYU looks pretty good right now.
All right. I want to get to one final thing, and it's a big weekend upcoming. Now, it kicks off 2 major weekends in recruiting for BYU, but this is the first of the 2. We'll get into who's expected to visit, what the importance of this weekend is, and we're going to talk to the man who I think knows about it more than anybody, and that's Jeff. And we'll get to that next right here on Locked On Cougars and Give Them Help Brigham. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Make sure you go out and download Jeff's preview of the upcoming BYU football season. It's college football in general, but it's BYU-specific content. And, Jeff, I love the way you framed it, by the way, when you talked about the fact that you opened a Phil Steele magazine and were like, hey, I'm excited to read about BYU. And to Phil's credit, he covers every team in college football, but it's 2, 3, maybe 4 pages at the very most for every single team. You've carved out 131 specific pages about BYU. So if people want to download this preview, how do they get it?
Yeah, the best way, and look, I can be transparent and honest with you, right, Jake? We did it on a Stripe site so that I can get around some of the fees and of these other networks. So hopefully we could drop a link or something in the comments. It's a direct link. If we can't hear, we can, if you find me on Twitter, it's in my Twitter profile there. Kind of a pain in the butt to get to, I'll be honest. There's no hiding behind that. Once you get there and you get the content, it's phenomenal. I think it's one of the, I don't mean to sound, egotistical or whatever, but it's hard to come up with unique content in this competitive media world. I think this is a truly unique piece of content for BYU football. I don't think anything like this exists that I know of. So I hope people enjoy it. I think so far people have really enjoyed it this year. So yeah, check it out. And I think it will be worth your time. It's pertinent today as you get ready for the season, but we talk about the teams, and we go in depth into coaching schemes and all of these things for each of BYU's opponents. It's something you can hold on to throughout the year, and it's going to be relevant information throughout the entire month of November.
It's standalone, in my opinion, because I bought it, it downloaded immediately, and I started reading it right away. So it's really not that hard to get to it. We will make sure to put it in the show notes and also in the YouTube comments. You can just click on it and buy it, download it, and read it, because it's awesome stuff. Now, we got a big weekend upcoming here, Jeff. Maybe the biggest 2 weekends in recent memory for BYU recruiting wise, but I want to start with this weekend in particular. Can you give Cougar fans a sense of the caliber of athletes BYU's recruiting now as members of the Big 12? Because I've tried to get it across, and I cover recruiting at a decent level, but I think you're the master at this. The level that BYU's recruiting, the 3 stars that sometimes people think they're still recruiting 3 stars. The level of the 3-star has gone up for BYU. Can you, quantify what I'm talking about here?
Yeah, I think that, look, we're about to get real nerdy here, Jake, but if you look at the 24/7 Sports ratings, it's a 0 to 100 scale, and really effectively it's a 70 to 100 scale. Anything between a 70 and 80 is a 2-star, 80 and 90. Well, I guess 80 and 89 is a 3-star, and the 90 and up is a 90 to 90. What is it? 90 to 97 is a 4-star, and the 98 and up is a 5-star. That's kind of the breakdown. So what does that mean? I mean, not really anything, but it kind of gives you an idea that there are low 3-stars that are, hey, they're just above a 2-star, right? That 82, 83 range. And then there are high 3-stars that are like, they're really close to 4-star dudes. And some other networks may have them as a 4-star guy. So if you look at what BYU has done, they are no longer recruiting the 82s and 83s. And back in the day, 5 years ago, 82s, 83s, 84s, that made up the bulk of BYU's class. Right now, the lowest rated commit is an 85, and most of the guys that they're really serious right now, that they're going after really seriously right now, are rated 85 and above. A lot of them are 4-star, high 3-star type guys who could end up being 4-stars by the end of the cycle. You know, if they have a strong summer and then they show well during their senior seasons. It's a different level of recruit. And then even within the 4-stars, if you go back and look at some of the recent 4-stars that BYU has signed, guys like, Logan Fano and Raider Demooney and guys like that, most of them kind of capped out at about a 90. But Faletau Satuala, I'm calling it the before Faletau and after Faletau because there's a very clear difference. Yeah. Faletau Satuala committed to BYU during the Army All-American game. He was rated a 94. That was the highest rated recruit in 10 years, 15 years, really since the 24/7 Sports era, maybe since Jake Heaps, right? I mean, it's that far back. And since Faletau Satuala at a 94 committed, Nusi Tamuepeo's flipped. He's a 91. McKay Madsen's a 92. Brock Harris is a 93. Bot Mulitalo is a 93. Hunter Clegg is a 92. BYU didn't have guys like that 5 years ago. You can go back 10 classes and BYU couldn't come up with 5 guys that were rated a 91 and above. They've got 5 guys in the last 18 months. Alai Kalani is another one. They are recruiting at a different level. Even at the top, it's always been about raise the floor for BYU. They've done that. They're also raising the ceiling. And quite frankly, Jake, I didn't know if BYU could do something like that. And they absolutely are in the last 12 to 18 months.
I had a coach at BYU. This goes back probably 5 years ago. That this is there were rumors of BYU maybe getting into the Big 12 at that point, but their comment to me at the time was, if we could find a way to affix the what was then the Power 5 label to our name, Jake, it will change everything for us. Doors will open to us that we can't have open to us. We can claim that he used the term Power 5 adjacent. I use that term all the time for BYU's late era independence run because they were trying to schedule as tough as they could. But it just wasn't. They didn't have the label next to their name. Since they got the label attached, you're right. The level of athlete that BYU is chasing and having the doors open to them to actually get, it's completely changed. And looking at this weekend, for example, Kawe Akana, who is a guy that I absolutely love. He's from Orem High School, who's expected to visit this weekend. He's one of those guys kind of indicative to me that I think in eras past for BYU, he probably would say, I love you, BYU, but I'm looking elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for my dollar, Kawe Akana might be my favorite player in the state of Utah, regardless of rankings. I think he's special. I think he's a college football player and a college football difference maker at receiver, at tight end, at safety, at linebacker. I think he could bulk up and play defensive end. I mean, he is a difference maker, I think, at 5 different positions. And it's just a matter of which one they decide to settle him in at. Very, very good player. He actually moved, and this was a recent development. He moved his visit to next week. So he's going to be part of this big monster visit. This is just in the last couple of days that I've learned this. So he'll be at BYU on, I guess, the 19th, July 19th. June.
That brings up a question. So yeah, and that weekend, it's already jam-packed.
Huge.
The Rider Lions and everything. So can you give us a sense of who's actually visiting this week? I think Ty Getchie was on that list that I saw originally. Was Isanali? I was also there. Like, who else is coming in this weekend then?
Yeah, I think they moved. They're trying very clearly. There's an effort by the coaching staff to have next week be huge. Yeah. So I think Parker Ord is still scheduled for this week. Ty Getchie, I believe, is scheduled for this week. There are a couple of others who are kind of on the fence. There were some other big names that were supposed to come. Kekua Aumua was going to come, but he just committed to Florida, canceled that visit. LaMarcus Bell was going to come. He just committed to Utah, so that visit was canceled. So it's setting up. It's still an incredibly important weekend for BYU. Solidify things with Taikechi. Parker Ord picks up a new offer, it seems like, every day. Very, very good tight end out of Arizona. And he's an Ord. Of course, BYU fans are familiar with that name.
Yeah. So explain the relationship to Andrew Ord for Parker.
I believe he told me, and I'm going to get it wrong, I'm sure, but I believe he's a nephew. Yeah. And I can't remember who exactly he's related to, but I believe he's a nephew.
All right. Well, the thing is, you mentioned the Ord name. BYU fans, they're like, oh, hey, Ord. Yeah. Okay, we're okay with this. But I guess the bigger question is, as they go through these couple of weekends upcoming and these visits, it's a chance to sell the program. And I've had some people say, well, Jake, why aren't they bringing these guys in during the season? Well, it's because June has become maybe the most critical month for official visits since they changed the calendar and allowed this, because a lot of guys want to get the decision out of the way. They go through these official visits in June. They make up their mind, whether it's late June, July, and then they're off into their senior football seasons. Is that the way you see it?
Yeah. I mean, the combination of summer visits being allowed and then a transfer portal window in December, kids, frankly, high school kids, they have to come off the board early. Come off the board, secure a spot. If you want to flip to a school in December, then, so be it, have at it. But you've got to secure your spots early, because what's happening is, as teams don't fill spots in June and July, if kids don't commit, they get into the season, and then there's a whole new set of film on guys who are going to enter into the transfer portal. And most colleges right now are saying, hey, why would I go get a high school guy who might transfer anyways, when I can go get this guy who's got some college experience in December? I don't have to worry about recruiting throughout the season, because that's hard to do. Everybody's schedules, you're busy, all this stuff. It's just easier to go into the transfer portal. So if you're a high school player and you're listening to this, commit in like the next 3 weeks. Otherwise, your spot is going to it might be gone. That's just kind of the nature of what the recruiting calendar has done. Fair or unfair, it is what it is. So yeah, I expect the next couple of weeks with visits to be pretty big for BYU. I expect a lot of announcements and players to come off the board. I think by the time we hit, by the time we're all kicking back and listening to Rascal Flats at Stadium of Fire, Jake, yeah. I think that's when everything will kind of have settled down, and you'll be able to kind of predict and get really, really, really tactical about who is left on the board in the high school ranks.
Makes sense. Well, Jeff, you are the man. Appreciate you taking the time to break things down for us. I would encourage everybody within the sound of our two voices to go and download your preview. It's well worth the money. And the best part is you can name your price. At $15 minimum, but I've seen people putting like $19.84 on there. Whatever you want to contribute, Jeff will take it, and it's well worth every penny in my book.
I appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. I hope everybody enjoys it. And we'll keep doing it every year. Phil still like, hey, you're great, but like, he doesn't talk about enough BYU for me. And that's really what this is all about.
No doubt. Well, Jeff, we'll do this again soon. Thanks for taking the time, man.
Appreciate it, Jake.
All right, there you go. That's Jeff Hansen. As always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And thank you, as always, for being everydayers here. But also would encourage you guys, make sure you go get over to Give Them Hell Brigham, Cougar Sports Insider, and supports Jeff's work along with the Daily Dose. I know he's trying to get back to doing that more often as well. But as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars a part of your day. And we will talk to you guys again tomorrow right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.